in poker, it would be referred to as sandbagging.
Right.
And that's why I was kind of flabbergasted. And I responded with, all these different reasons why I didn't want to do the test, including explaining to the audience why LDL cholesterol is meaningless and why what you want to measure is LDL size and density, or ApoB number, or LDL particle number. And I talked about the relationship with stress and the children. And what they ended up doing is our segment ran long.
Mm-hmm.
And they had to cut some stuff. And when we were walking off, I was hoping they would cut the cholesterol, and I suggested it to them, and I was hoping they would cut Oz's 24 hours on the diet, but that's not what they cut. What they cut were my explanations.
That's right.
And if you actually watch the show, for instance, there's one point where I go from mentioning the word clinical trials, and I'm remembering now, forgive me if I don't get it exactly right, but I mention the word clinical trials, and they go directly to Oz's 24 hours on the diet. And after the clinical trials, what I was explaining was that Oz's attitude about saturated fat, or his beliefs about how it causes heart attacks, was all nice and good, but when clinical trials have been done, comparing in effect my diet, or the low-carb, meat, animal product-heavy diet, an Atkins-like diet to a low-fat, calorie-restricted diet, they always got the same results, which are that the cholesterol profiles improve. So a lot of the things that people wanted me to say, and this sounds, the problem with even doing this interview is now I'm defending myself after the fact. I actually said when we taped the segment 10 days before it was aired, but we'll cut out afterwards. And I end up, I wasn't even going to watch the segment because I can't stand watching myself on TV, but my wife said, you got to watch it. Yeah. And we did record it. And I'm sitting there thinking, I'm standing there with this idiotic smile on my face while Oz is going on, and I'm blathering about cholesterol is meaningless, LDL is meaningless with no explanations. And all those statements were given explanations that had since been removed. So, did I feel like they went out of their way to make me look bad? And the answer is yes. But the flip side is they can't, Oz is portrayed as a source of medical wisdom. That's the whole shtick of the show, and they can't afford to have somebody on the show citing, randomized controlled trials like scientific evidence that Oz is wrong. So from their point of view, this is what they have to do to keep the concept of the show intact. They can't have the guy who says Oz is wrong being the guy for whom the medical evidence supports.
Well, and anybody who heard you on his radio show just a week prior, which you said you taped 2 or 3 weeks before that.
We taped 2 or 3, a couple months before.
Okay, so I mean, anybody who heard you on his radio show, Gary, I mean, you articulated a lot of really good points in that radio show, and I put that up on YouTube for people to hear. I mean, you would think this guy was like all over the concepts that you talk about. And so go ahead.
Yeah, this is what happens on TV. The audience, I mean, I don't know how large the audience is for a satellite radio show, but I assume it's tiny.
Sure.
This is national television. This is, as they kept telling me, entertainment, and we have to entertain. And I think from Oz's point of view also, and this is, I assume, why he brought up the cholesterol question. He simply, we're going back and forth, and he's got, like I said, what you do in sandbagging in poker is you've got a very good hand, you don't bet, and then you let other people raise the pot, and then when it comes back around to you, either that card or the next card, you re-raise and let them have it. Mm-hmm. So you maximize their losses. As you could see, I used to play probably too much poker when I was younger. And it's a very effective way, and it's a very effective argument. It did, for some people, exactly what Oz wanted it to do, which was make them question my credibility. If Taubes isn't willing to stand up and have them measure his cholesterol, how much can he believe in what he writes? And I mean, this is why he did it, and it's a valid response for people who watch the show. if you read the books, you would have one good idea why I don't want, LDL cholesterol measured. And comparing it to Oz is inane off the get-go, but this is, as they kept saying, entertainment. And it's funny, the reason why, up until this health insurance policy, I never had my cholesterol numbers checked. And the reason is pretty simple, as I would tell my wife and other friends. If it turns out that my LDL cholesterol is high or my total cholesterol is high, what am I going to do? Go on a low-fat diet?
That's right.
I obviously believe the research. And I'm going to live with what I'm doing one way or the other. I'm committed to this way of eating and what I've written. I've bet my reputation on it. That's pretty much the story. And yeah, I was chagrined, but like I said, I think the show, I think it did, there were far more pluses than minuses.
Well, and I was going to ask you, how are the book sales? It's been, as of the taping of this, a little over a week or so since it's aired. Are the book sales doing pretty well?
Well, they certainly went up. You can watch your numbers on Amazon for people who don't pay attention. Amazon gives a number that it updates every hour about, how many, basically, where you are in the great bestseller list of life. So it starts with the number one bestseller and it goes down to like 3 or 4 or 5 million for books that sell, no copies a year. My numbers improved. They definitely went up. They didn't go up as high as I would have wished. And that's possibly because of the fact that, if Oz had stood there the way Oprah does and said, this is an important book, I want every one of my viewers to read it, then boom, we have, very close to a, New York Times bestseller. But he's not going to do that.
He did try, though, when he said he respected your work.
Let me applaud you for this. I want to say this. I've been giving Gary a hard time, but I respect your work immensely.
So I appreciated that he at least said that he respected your work enough to have you come and lecture to his fellow colleagues and that kind of thing. So he did say that several times in the part that made it on television.
Yeah, and that was important. I mean, like I said, I give him credit. I think, and he may not have even known how the show was edited afterwards. I very much doubt he has the time to pay attention to that. Maybe giving him more credit than his credit is due. But, that's he kept saying how much he respected the book, how much he respected my work, my intelligence. He used this line, about makes us kick the tires.
I got to say for everybody, I disagree, but I respect what Gary's been doing. He does his homework well. I actually had him come to my hospital, New York Presbyterian, and lecture the doctors and faculty about some of his ideas. And I just want to get into this because I think it's a huge value for all of us. If you kick the tires on what we're saying.
After I went from the show to the airport and in the car, I kept thinking, why didn't I say to him? This is what you do when you go on television, like you do in any conversation, where afterward you're being challenged. Afterwards you think of all the witty things you should have said.
Yep.
And I was thinking, why didn't I say to him, Oz, kicking the tires doesn't do a lot of good after you've totaled the car. For what it's worth, they probably would have cut that out if I had said it anyway. Probably.
It was interesting the way they talked about the diet, and they had the kind of one side and the other side with the foods. And I kept thinking, in addition to the vegetables that they put on your side, they could have thrown more than one strawberry over on the low-carb side.
If I pass over one of these strawberries, right, you're off the diet. No, you're not.
Did you kind of feel like, all right, he's kind of nitpicking at the diet now, because most low-carbers can have a strawberry or 2 or 3 or 4.
There are a lot of places where, like when we were discussing his, my diet versus his diet, even with the producer before they taped the segment, I kept saying, well, there's salmon and fish on my diet too. There's, on the almonds, it's all about just not eating these refined carbs and starches and sugars, which Oz agrees with.
Right.
The question then gets down to, whole grains and fruit. We both agree on the green vegetables, and they didn't want fish on my side because then it wouldn't be enough of a comparison and you lose the entertainment. They did. So there was some of it was done for entertainment. Some of it was obviously done. Even the either the panels behind me while I'm talking, and Taubes says, 0 carbs, or Taubes says all fats are good, and I kept saying, no, that's not what Taubes says.
Right.
And at least they kept that in the shows. They literally did cut most of the editing was done in the last 4 or 5 minutes, which is where the cholesterol stuff came up. The early stuff, as far as I can remember, they left. I don't know if they cut anything. You do what you can.